Welcome to another episode of Think, Change, Repeat. I am your host, Ashley, and this is show number 002. And I'm unfortunately getting an echo somewhere. So my apologies for that. But today's date is April the 9th, 2006. Bear with me while I get my sound worked out. Okay. I think I fixed the echo. Now, tonight I was supposed to be speaking with Rawad, my friend from Lebanon, and unfortunately, I have not heard back from him as far as whether or not he got the link for us to do the show. And I just decided to go ahead and start it on my own. And I have to say that that is a little bit scary. I was not planning on going solo, so I'm just going to go over what I have and talk about the situation in Lebanon. I'm going to hope that Rawad is able to join me. And if not, maybe we can speak to him at another time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you have been watching Guard, Goldsmith, or Angry Tiger last night, then you perhaps have seen some about what is transpiring in Lebanon, but it's almost one of these issues that is not really being talked about very much as far as what most people are discussing. Obviously, the main thing that is being talked about is the conflict with Iran and the fact that the Strait of Hormuz right now, President Trump is not happy with the way that that is being operated, and so there's a lot of different information surrounding that particular issue. But one of the things that is with the issue with Lebanon is that we had these really amazing claims from President Trump starting on Easter Sunday, and he was saying that it was using vulgar language, and he was telling them to open the straits, and he called them crazy bastards in Iran. And then the following, I think it was Monday, he said that he was going to end the civilization. So I think that most people here are aware of that. But then we kind of everybody was waiting with bated breath, really, to see if what would end up happening in with that entire situation as of 8 p.m. on Monday or Tuesday night. And we got the news that there was a an agreed upon peace negotiations, or like a 2-week pause, and there were certain things that had been agreed upon by both sides. And then we know that Pakistan was serving not necessarily as the mediator, but as the go between between the sides in order to facilitate that. So we got the word that that was good. And then we soon got the word within a couple of hours after that that Israel had started bombing Lebanon. And this is a point of contention because it was supposed to be included in this arrangement, according to a lot of sources, that it was agreed upon that Lebanon would not be bombed. So we're continuing to see that happening with Israel bombing Lebanon as we speak. So that is another issue as far as the peace agreement. And I know there's a lot of people that are covering this, but um, um, and you may have seen this shared somewhere else, but today Judge Napolitano had a really good conversation with Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone about this exact issue. So I wanted to share some of this information, and I'm just going to show a couple of minutes of this, and it will give us an idea of what has happened so far. So one of the major issues is supposedly that Israel is going after Hezbollah in Lebanon. That is kind of the I don't I suppose it could be called a ruse, but basically that is their motivation. As far as we are being told, is that they are trying to bomb these terrorists. But it has unfortunately coincided with some really aggressive action on their part, and we're seeing civilians actually suffering, as often takes place whenever we're dealing with war. So bear with me while I get this shared to the stage, and we're going to present just a few minutes of this interview. And I felt like it was pretty good coverage of what is actually taking place there.
My dear friend and colleague, Max Blumenthal, joins us now. Max, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time today. Is there a ceasefire between the United States and Iran as we speak?
No, there's not a ceasefire. And it looks to me, having lived through the last 3 years and seeing how pauses in, for example, the Gaza genocide were exploited for Israel to remobilize and rearm, that we're witnessing something similar as U.S. Marines are being deployed to the region. And as Israel was on the verge of running out of interceptors and Iran had really consolidated its momentum, the United States, via Pakistan, attempted to create the impression of a ceasefire. Now, this allowed Donald Trump to game the markets. And we're seeing that some White House insider has placed a close to $1 billion bet on the price of Brent crude going down as Donald Trump sent oil prices tumbling with his announcement of his acceptance of Iran's National Security Council's 10-point plan as a baseline for discussions and negotiations. But the more revealing part of this ceasefire was how the United States government, looks like the State Department, had provided Pakistan's Shehbaz Sharif, Pakistan's leader, with the framework or the terms that were agreed upon for the ceasefire as a draft. And Sharif, or someone in his office, posted the draft, including the header that said terms for Sharif. And then they edited the tweet on X, but everyone could see that he had basically been fed these terms. These terms explicitly included Lebanon as part of the ceasefire. So the United States had agreed to include Lebanon. Iran had agreed to include Lebanon through Pakistan. So what does Israel do? Commits one of the worst massacres in history in Lebanon, massacring over 250 people, wounding over 1,200 people. There are families lining up outside hospitals to identify the bodies of over 90 people today. They were bombing not just the Dahia section of Beirut, which is the Shia majority area where Hezbollah has had some offices, and they can always justify mass destruction and killings of civilians on that basis that it's majority Shia. They were bombing areas like Ain Raisi, the Corniche in the center of Beirut, areas where opponents of Hezbollah live. They killed a famous Lebanese poet and her husband. Entire families were killed inside their homes. They bombed a funeral in a cemetery with a 500-pound bomb. The entire purpose of this was to sabotage the ceasefire and to provoke Iran into defending its ally in Lebanon. And what does the White House go and do? Including J.D. Vance, the so-called restrainer. J.D. Vance said, oh, well, those terms, they were actually AI. That was all AI-generated slop. In other words, they're basically denying that there ever was a ceasefire deal that included Lebanon.
So the 10 points that the United States sent to Sharif.
No, these weren't 10 points. Iran's National Security Council, which advises Iran's leader,
right,
Mojtaba Khamenei, introduced a 10-point proposal for what Iran sought to elicit from the talks. And these are basically, this is the framework for Iran's sovereignty going forward. And Sharif posted the terms that had already been agreed upon in order for this cessation of hostilities to have discussions in Islamabad. And those terms explicitly included Lebanon. I mean, you can just go to his X account and see it right there. And then once Israel decides we don't want to include Lebanon, we want to blow up all of Lebanon, like they attacked the entire country and attacked civilians explicitly. Like it was a performative slaughter. Once they did that, the Trump administration was forced to pull back, and it shows you the entire dynamic, which is that Israel determines when the U.S. goes to war and when the U.S. stops under Trump.
Here's the U.S. chief negotiator who, as we speak, is somewhere between Washington and Islamabad. And on his plane are the two people that Foreign Minister Arachi told him not to bring,
Yeah.
Kushner and Woodcock. But here's the vice president saying just what you said, Max. Oh, it was just a misunderstanding. Chris, cut number 22.
I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. That said, the Israelis, as I understand it, again, I'm supposed to get a fuller report when I get on the plane, have actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. That's not because that is part of the ceasefire. I think that's the Israelis trying to set us up for success, and we'll, of course, see how that unfolds in the next few days. But look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
There's truth in what he just said.
I mean, we were told J.D. Vance was the one who engineered this ceasefire, working with China, which has normal diplomatic relations with Iran and somewhat normal relations with the U.S. So they're like a key broker here. But you can see from his comments that he's very poorly informed. And these comments are disqualifying for J.D. Vance as a president, and that he is lying. He's just lying through his teeth because the terms are right there on Prime Minister Sharif's X account, and it included Lebanon. And Lebanon does not have nothing to do with Iran or the broader conflict. It was Israel that decided to launch a ground invasion into Lebanon after it secured U.S. support, basically secured the U.S. as a proxy force for attacking Iran. So it was Israel that launched the assault on Lebanon and made Lebanon a part of the war. It is Hezbollah that's defending Lebanon from Israel. And it is Israel that decided to blow up the ceasefire by attacking Lebanon. And so J.D. Vance is not only being dishonest, he's presenting a version of reality that flips on its head what Israel is doing before everyone's eyes. And so this is disqualifying for Vance. I feel very concerned about Vance supposedly offsetting the ideologically Zionist negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, who are going to Islamabad. I don't even know if J.D. Vance will be present there. And of course, he's what it was. It looked like he was speaking from Hungary, from Budapest, because he was sent off to campaign for Orban to get him out of the way. So how much?
Okay, so I wanted to show that clip because I thought that this entire video, I do recommend if you're interested in some of the side issues that are surrounding the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran, I find this to be a really important piece, and it could certainly come into play in the future with the fact that when I was looking at some of Gregory Manarino's work earlier today, he said that the peace agreement is fraying. And then Disclosed TV, right before I started the show, said that Trump was not happy with what was happening in regards to the Strait of Hormuz. So my understanding is that they are requiring, before you pass through the strait, that you are making a payment. So they're essentially collecting tolls, and that they're going to be accepting Bitcoin, and they're going to be accepting Chinese yuan. And there was maybe one other currency that are being used. And so this has been a paradigm change. This is something that Judge Napolitano has been talking about for weeks now, the fact that they have been banging on the doors saying that the strait needs to be open, but the strait was open before all of this started. And then this video gets into it a little bit more. They kind of set the stage for what they are telling us happened, that before the original strike on Iran, that Bibi Netanyahu was in town and he ended up being treated like a king, like he was actually the president here. And that he essentially told them that the same story that we've been hearing for many, many decades, essentially, that they had that Iran was weeks away from a nuclear weapon and that Trump agreed to the strike. And privately, while many people such as Marco Rubio and other people involved in the administration, that they did not agree with this. They thought it was a terrible idea. They thought it was not true. They did not stand up to President Trump. That's the official story that we're getting from from Max Blumenthal. Now, I often wonder in these situations, what is like some of the very influential think tanks that are out there. So, for example, like the World Economic Forum or the Tavistock Institute, or even some of these very wealthy donors, such as Miriam Adelson. What kind of input do they have? And I'm not making a claim. I'm just speculating on that. So, if you're interested, I highly recommend seeking this video out because it gives a lot of good information about what's currently transpiring in Lebanon. And then that is in the greater context of what is this doing for the peace negotiations that we're supposed to be having, or this 2-week break that is supposed to be happening. And having said that, Rawad has joined me. So we got our times a little bit crossed, but he's here and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to bring him on and then we're going to get into a little bit of his story and his experience in Lebanon, as well as his family members that are still there. Hello, Rawad. How are you?
Hi, Ashley. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I know we had our times mixed up, but I'm very happy to see you. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, more than happy to be here. Sorry about the mix-up. I thought
Yeah.
I was just 1 hour behind you. Turns out
Yeah.
we're 2 hours behind.
No worries at all. Yeah, that could be the recent time change that we had as well. But no worries, you're here and I appreciate it. So I was thinking what I wanted to do is introduce you a little bit and kind of as much of your journey as you want to share. So Rawad is from Lebanon originally and spent most of his life there before moving around to a couple places. So can you tell us a little bit about that, just your basic journey? And then I want to get into your experience of growing up in Lebanon, and then we'll move on to kind of what the current event that you're hearing. And I know you said you don't know much more than the average person, but you do have a little bit of information on the ground, so we'll cover that. But if you don't mind, go ahead and tell us a little bit of your story as far as being leaving Lebanon and where you're located now.
Yeah, first, I think for the context, it's very important to mention that I was born and raised a Catholic as a Lebanese. So I don't know how to describe, but that's all you need to know for now. And my parents live in a majority Christian area, so they're not very affected by the attacks. As to myself, I've left Lebanon about 13 years ago, first to Turkey, and now I'm based in Mexico after having lived in a couple of more places after Turkey before moving to Mexico in 2022.
Okay, yes. And I did want to let everyone know that Rawad and I met through our autonomy class and have been friends, good friends now for a couple of years, and that he is an entrepreneur. So I want to touch on that and make sure to let anyone know where they can find you if they are interested in your services, Rawad. But I'm glad that you brought up the fact that you grew up in a majority Catholic area, because that's something that I think a lot of us, especially as Americans, we can be very insulated in regards to considering all of the Middle East predominantly Muslim. But what I was looking up and had heard earlier is that there's actually a very large percentage of Christians in Lebanon, and it is down from about 50%, maybe in the 70s, to around 30% Christian at this time. But that was something that I wanted to touch on. Did you feel uh, exposed to or experience discrimination based on that while you were growing up? Or do you feel like it was pretty well accepted that some people are Muslim and some people are Catholic?
There is definitely some discrimination. So, for example, I held a job at a magazine that was based in the heart of Beirut. And on my first day, my colleague would ask me, and from which direction did you come to work today? So they're trying to locate where I'm based in order for them to know if I'm Christian or Muslim, and then you will have more questions around, are you Sunni, are you Shiite, or you're Maronite, which is Catholic, or you're Orthodox.
Okay, so it sounds like it was maybe a factor or at least somewhat a consideration, but maybe it didn't interfere with your day-to-day goings on, like when you were growing up and going to school, that kind of thing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. No, you would not be directly attacked, especially like when we were young. A lot of my generation, they were trying to be very open-minded, mostly leftists. So they were you didn't have this kind of vibe. But as you move out of like the center of Beirut and outside of like the cities, they become more conservatives, of course, but never really affected us in the way we live. Because you always had your Christian areas and you have your Muslim areas.
Okay, and if the two happen to interact, though, it wasn't, because one of the things that I'm curious about, and I am using Israel as an example because it's something that has been so much in the news, but we hear people, like, if they are, for example, like a Sephardic Jew living in Israel, that or Muslim or something like that, that there is extreme discrimination against those types of people. But was this something that you were very mindful of? Or if you happen to interact with people from the Muslim faith, it wasn't really a big deal?
No, it was never a big deal. Never.
Yeah.
We lived through the war. Sometimes we got discriminated by some Christian factions or militias based on whose side you're on. Are you with Aoun, that was the president? He was like the head of the army, and then you had Jaja, who was like the head of the militia, the Christian militia. So, and based on that, I did encounter an incident where my uncle was stopped by somebody in his building and questioning on which side he is, and they were about to basically shoot him in the head.
So talk to us about that. Was that a civil war? And I just want to say that I am certainly not up to date on my history of Lebanon. I do hope to become more educated as we have our conversation, and it's certainly an important factor in what is transpiring in the Middle East. So I think it's important to know what's going on there. But was this a civil war that you were growing up during?
Yes, exactly. That was a situation during the Civil War. Nowadays, you don't get much of that. Like I've been also away for a long time. I'm not closely following the news, especially even this war, because every few years we have something going on in Lebanon. But to answer your question, yeah, at the moment, I don't think you would face any such like incidents unless you have trespassed or tried to. You were suspected that you were doing something, like Christian person coming to a, let's say, Hezbollah stronghold. They would stop you not based on your faith, but they would immediately know that you're not from the area, for example. In these areas, like the militia, the strongholds, they would immediately tell that you're not from the area, then you might face some issues. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is growing up, and often we hear the term war torn. So that would certainly describe part of the situation that you grew up in. But as a child and a teen growing up in this, what was it like under the threat of civil war? And then at any time while you were there, did you was the issue with Israel happening? Because you and I were talking, and this was a couple of years ago now, back in our Bitcoin mystery school days, and Israel was already bombing Lebanon. They were already bombing Beirut, and they have been for many, many months now. And I'm going to say maybe even a year and a half, 2 years, well before the conflict with Iran began. So was this something that you were cognizant of when you were growing up and feeling like, we could be attacked by another country at any time?
Honestly, I forgot when they returned the south, because what was it? When was it? Well, Israel had occupied the south of Lebanon for a few years before they returned it, but it seems at the moment that they are gonna be trying to get hold of it for a longer period of time. But I don't know how to describe it. So we were worried mostly about Hezbollah as a Christian, myself at the time, like when they're gonna try to take over the entire country, because we thought that they would be able to do so at the time, and we were afraid that they will do so. And there was I don't know which year, but there were talks. I forgot the details, but Hezbollah did have we did have a mini civil war where like Sunnis and Shiites were attacking one another, and Hezbollah was trying to take over certain areas. But yeah, I forgot all the details. I don't want to give you false details and you think that there was actually a civil war. But yeah, it's not something that we were constantly worried about. And Israel, we always thought that it's going to be in the south until 2006, when they attacked like the infrastructure in Lebanon.
And in 2006, was that also transpiring in Beirut? And actually, before you answer, Rawad, one of the things that I have been seeing and learning, or at least that was discussed on this Judge Napolitano video with Max Blumenthal, was that Hezbollah is actually taking the lead in order to defend the country right now from the strikes that are being deployed by Israel. But So I'm curious about what was the reason that was given to you and the people of Lebanon in 2006 for being attacked by Israel? Like, was it an understanding that they want to control this area? They want the land, they want the resources, or how was that? What did people think?
In my circle, we always thought that Hezbollah needs to be outed. Because we thought that all of our troubles since 2006 have been, they were using Hezbollah as an excuse, right? The Israeli government. So we always thought that if we get rid of Hezbollah, everything will be fine. But of course, this is just a delusion. But it did create some sense of can we at least try, right? But it never happened. And the army was too weak, really, is too weak to do anything against Israel in the south. And Hezbollah, as you know, as a militia, it's not a regular militia. It's like the people who live there are the militia. So Israel has a very difficult task, which they have encountered in 2006, where you enter a village, but you have no idea who can be a Hezbollah member, because they're not necessarily in uniform.
Right. And that is one of the things that we often hear in some of these types of wars. Like in my study of the Vietnam War, that was a huge problem. You know, this was supposed to be the Americans and the South Vietnamese were battling the communists of the North Vietnamese. And it was an arbitrary border that was just decided on. The Vietnamese people did not have a say in that. And this was one of the things that, you know, they're supposedly fighting the Viet Cong in order to stop the domino spread of communism. But there was no way to discern who was Viet Cong, who was South Vietnamese, who was innocent. I mean, they could go by age. Sometimes they could tell, like, obviously, this is an elderly person or this is a child, but there was really no way for them to be able to tell. And that's one of the factors that muddies up the people that ended up being killed in that particular conflict, is that they don't know necessarily who was who. And this was an agrarian society, a lot of farmers, a lot of people dressed the same way. So it was difficult to discern. Um, Up here, I have pulled up a map, Rawad, and I wanted to show. So if we come out, then we can see where um, Lebanon is in regards to Israel. So we can see that it is the north border of Israel. And what we have been hearing about, the primary bombing area is Beirut. And then I have also heard that there was like a certain territory, and it may have even been in the Judge Napolitano video, but there's a certain territory based on a water structure that they are trying to really take over. And a lot of, you know, people are saying that this is a continuance of the greater Israel project. And I think that that does make sense. However, it may not be the only explanation. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Rawad. And I know, again, you said that you're not super keeping up with everything right now, but is this part of what you thought? I mean, it sounds like you confirmed it earlier that they wanted the territory, particularly what is bordering Israel.
Yeah, I don't know if they're still using this excuse, but one of the excuses was at the time, like back in the days, 20 years ago, was that they needed to take that part of Lebanon up to the Litani River. You can see it on the screen. You know, where you see where the word or where the town Nabatea is. Yeah, I think around there. The excuse was that they wanted to stop the Hezbollah from being able to send these dropping these missiles into the heart of Israel. But I don't know if they're still using that excuse anymore.
Well, I definitely, from what I have seen, again, I do not claim to be a scholar, but from what I have seen, that is the reasoning, is that we are, as Israel, that we are targeting Hezbollah. And that is why we're going after particular infrastructure in the places that we're doing it. However, when you pointed out this town, this is essentially, I would say, like right in the center of the country, basically. And what was the name of the river that you had said?
Litani.
Litani. Okay. So that does sound familiar. But then if we zoom out and we look at the map, Beirut is all the way at the very north of the country. So it doesn't make sense necessarily in terms of geography, but it does make sense if you're continuing to use the excuse that you're attacking Hezbollah.
Yeah, they need to attack Beirut and the areas where Hezbollah is based, and that's all in Beirut.
Yes.
But they've probably so far leveled everything. They've been targeting other Christian areas as well, and the excuse is always like there might be somebody, a leader or whatever, stationed there. They did kill someone from the leadership, I think they claimed today or a few days ago.
Yes, and in the video that I had previewed earlier, showed like a few minutes of that. They discussed, this was the claim, that they were going after members of Hezbollah leadership, but there had been a funeral that was struck. There was 90 people lining up at a hospital trying to claim their loved ones. So there have been, Max referred to it as one of the worst massacres in the history of Lebanon, which is like over 250 people that had been killed, civilians, in this strike. So it appears that they, and we've heard this many times about this particular, like, the Israeli military, that they are not discriminating against actually who is killed. And I guess oftentimes that does happen in war. One of the other things that I heard in that clip was that, or that interview, was that a lot of the IDF, I mean, we've been hearing some rumors that the IDF is very weakened right now, except for maybe the special forces, and that they're having to pay some of these people to be involved in this conflict in Lebanon, almost like they're mercenaries, in order to get them to participate. So it sounds like their morale and their desire to participate in this conflict may not be, where it once was, but it's still, as we often talk about, it's always the regular people and the civilians that really suffer.
Absolutely. And there's nothing to add in there. I'm sure they've been using mercenaries since forever. It's nothing new. And yeah, I have no idea, but my speculation is that it's all planned. Israel doesn't care much about the outcome. They know they're not going to be annihilated, or whatever the word is.
Yep,
anytime
annihilated.
soon. Yeah, I think there's a wider strategic, outcomes that they're looking at. One of them could be that, okay, now the Gulf countries need to reroute their pipelines into Israel instead of using the Strait of Hormuz. So that could be it, and that of course could be very, very lucrative for them. So yeah, I don't know about what your opinion about this is.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I'm no geopolitical expert or anything like that, but what we do know is, or what we have heard about, is the Greater Israel Plan. We do know that location in the Middle East is so important, that although Israel is very small, if they are able to take over the areas that seem to be part of the Greater Israel Plan, then that would be complete control of the Middle East. And the resources are incredibly valuable. The shipping lines, like all the things that we see right now being contested or discussed, are at play here. Now, I wonder if it truly is for the Greater Israel Project, and it's something that pure speculation on my part, but I wonder if this is the ushering in of the energy crisis, of the green agenda, in part because it is affecting our ability all across the world to receive fertilizer, natural gas, and oil right now. And the countries that, at least in my understanding, that are being enriched by this is Iran. Now, they say that they're using the toll that they're taking at the Strait of Hormuz in order to repair. They're taking that instead of reparations, basically. And that that Russia and China are also doing well based on the sale of their oil and goods and things like that, because they're on functioning terms with Iran. So I don't know exactly where it's headed, but I definitely am concerned about the potential energy crisis, the food and fertilizer crisis that would be impactful for the entire world. And it could be all of these things rolled into one, but it's just so difficult to say. But I think that it's interesting to hear your perspective from growing up there. And it was kind of even though you were told that Hezbollah was the bad guy, it was like you always had this understanding that Israel wanted to control at least the southern half of Lebanon. So I think there's something obviously very important about that.
Yeah, speaking of the control of the region, they already control it. Maybe they need trying to eliminate Hezbollah as a threat, and you no longer have much to worry about. Hamas has already been taken care of, and I think Hezbollah would be the next, and then that's about it. The Houthis are a bit too far, but they could be the next ones. Yeah, the way they operated in Lebanon in general was that the civil war was partially probably been instigated by Israel and together with the US to keep us weakened. That's for sure. But you don't need that any longer because people are already they're already impoverished by the state, and they're easily manipulated by religious rhetoric, like they're against us, the Sunnis now are against us, they're outnumbering us. And then you have the Sunnis hearing something about Hezbollah, and Hezbollah hearing about uses the past where they were maltreated by the others, and they were looked down on, basically, because they were all farmers and very, very poor. And now they've become like I don't know, they've regained or reclaimed some of that, whatever they think that they regard that they need to have as the chosen people of Allah.
So it's very interesting that you say that, because obviously that is not the same situation in the US, but it sounds very familiar, Rawad, because that has been part of the huge division. And you and I have talked about that. We talk about it all the time in Bitcoin Mystery School, because Cyprian or Vin Armani always said that their degeneracy will be your trap. So he could see all that time ago the division narrative that was being laid of people that were more conservative being really angry about like the transgender agenda or whatever was, transgender story hour that was always in the news at that time. And so we saw the division between, I don't even know what to call them anymore. Like, it used to be Republicans and Democrats, and then it became conservative and progressive, and it was like these extreme continuums. And you did have some people that were still more towards the center, but we have seen these sides become more and more and more divided. And so that exact same rhetoric or that style of propaganda is working, I mean, maybe everywhere, but certainly that has been deployed in the United States to keep people at each other's throats. Like, oh, I hate you because you're a liberal. Oh, I hate you because you're a conservative, or you voted for President Trump, or whatever that is. It makes it very easy to write people off, and it makes it very difficult for people who share so much more in common. Like, you share a country and you're the regular people. It makes it so much more difficult for them to unify against the force that is actually dividing them. So it sounds very familiar, even though previously the rhetoric has not necessarily been religious here in the States. There's an element of that. As you know, you have spent so much time paying attention to what's going on in America. You're very well versed in that. And so there is the slightly religious element of pro-life versus the pro-choice side. And we have seen some extremes in that continuum, but overall, it hasn't necessarily been religious. But the division and getting people to be divided among those lines it's so easy now. It's been happening for many, many years.
Yeah, they're using the religious narrative now in the US to defend Israel and their actions. Right? You have the Christian Zionists and so on. So there's always an element to that. Yeah, in Lebanon, it's easier to do because the poorer the people, the more religious they are, the more conservative, and that's the state of Lebanon. you have a large majority of people who are poor and easily manipulated using the religious element, and but also I would say, yeah, it's religious. Not necessarily that everybody is religious, but I could give myself as an example. Although I wasn't religious at the time, but when it comes to when it comes to when in truth, I was really I would favor that the Christians would be safeguarded that rather than the other sects.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably normal because you grew up with this divisive rhetoric. And how are you supposed to know? Like, it's taken so many of us decades. It's our whole journey to get to the point where we begin to at least somewhat see the manipulation that has happened to us, you know? And at one point in our conversation, I do want to kind of get to where you have evolved as far as your religion goes, because this is your Holy Week and you are celebrating and fasting and things like that. So I do want to get into that. But just before we do, I I think it's very normal for us as children to believe what we're told about who are the bad guys, who are the good guys. We're the good guys, right? In whatever group that we are a part of. So I think that's very, very normal. But if you are lucky, eventually you start to see this division narrative. There's really a game that is being played in order to pit sides against each other.
Yeah. What is there to add? Nothing.
Okay, perfect, because we're moving on. So, as far as the family that you have left in Lebanon, can you tell us a little bit about, as much as you're comfortable with, who do you still have there? And they are not in Beirut. And we talked about that many, many months ago, that they're not located in Beirut, thank goodness. But talk to us about what is their day-to-day life like now. Is it different? We had talked about your parents and they're kind of being, glued to the news, things like that, but has life changed for them? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, they're not very far off from Beirut. Lebanon is a very tiny country. As you said, they're glued to the screen. My parents are quite old. I have two brothers and one sister, and they live with their families. Also far from Beirut. The situation is how they're affected is mostly economic. Like from day one, gas prices have increased by 40, 60%. I don't know how much it is there now at, and so that's pretty much it. But I have my brother actually works on the port of Beirut. Thanks to God, he was not. It was not his work day when they bombed the port back in 2019, or was it right, or 2020? I forgot.
It was,
So
yes. I was thinking about that today too, Rawad, because that's another thing that most people don't know about that. They don't remember that, but that was a huge event. And I believe it was at the port, a fertilizer plant. Is that correct?
that's what they claimed. There are multiple theories as to what had happened, but yeah, it destroyed all the neighborhoods around the port as well. But I want to say that my brother is still working. The port is still operating, so that's his income basically. So they still living. They still the jobs are still, or businesses are still running in some areas. So my family is safe, and they still have their jobs. I don't know if you have been following the news today, but it seems that the truce is not going to hold for long, because Lebanon is still is not included in the ceasefire?
Exactly. Yes, I played a clip before you came on, and that was exactly what they were talking about, that this is a very fraying 2-week peace agreement that we're dealing with because of exactly go ahead. I want you to go ahead and finish saying that, but because of Iran being upset because Israel started bombing Lebanon immediately after this 2-week peace agreement was agreed to, and Iran is advocating, at least that's what we're hearing, on behalf of Lebanon and saying that they are to be protected and that they were part of this agreement. Then our administration is saying, no, 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 this is a misunderstanding or whatever. Go ahead, Rawad.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Iran will not care much about Lebanon. They have the list of demands. If they get 85%, I read somewhere, and it makes sense that they're going to go for it. If they're going to keep the tolls and benefit forever, they've already proven that basically they're going to be a consistent threat to whoever is affected by it, so they control the strait and they can stop it at any time. Nobody can stop them. But they have a list of things they want to accomplish, and if they have to make a compromise about Lebanon, I'm sure it's down on the list if they can get the other things.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it goes back to our question earlier about really what is the plan? Is this it it is planned as you clearly stated. Obviously, Israel has had a presence there for a very long time and bombings have been happening, but exactly which plan is this a part of? Is this simply to continue to sun down some countries, including the United States, and perhaps the rise of BRICS? Is this the economic reset? Is this the net zero agenda? Is this greater Israel? Is it all of them combined? I think there's a lot of questions about exactly what is at play here. But I think that you have made a great point that, you know, perhaps Iran is trying to stand in the way, but depending on which way this is going, they may not continue to stand on that leg. That may be something that they're willing to sacrifice. So one thing that I wanted to talk to you about is that we've talked about the biggest effect on your family being economic. So one of the huge things is gas prices going up exponentially, which I think is very interesting. A point that I want to make for people listening here in the States, or I know we have at least one Canadian listener right now. Shout out to those folks, which I will get to. But we are starting to see that here. Once the first initial strike happened in this particular conflict with Iran, we began seeing gas prices go up almost immediately, like within the first day or two. And this is something that I have pondered, and it certainly tracks with the net zero agenda, which is essentially one of those elements is to make gasoline unaffordable, basically, for the average person, which is a great way to ground flights and make changes to people's driving habits and keep people at home, which is very reminiscent of pandemic times. But what other changes have people experienced? Is it, would you consider it like food shortages or extreme price increases in food supply? And what other economic ways are they being affected, or maybe electricity, things like that?
Yeah, everything has, all the prices have risen. So in Lebanon, you don't have, the state doesn't have a strong hold on pricing. So you have the, how would you call them? Suppliers, merchants. They immediately start taking advantage of the situation without anybody stopping them, really. So you have this going on since forever. Like every time we have a conflict or any situation, similar situation, they immediately raise the prices, and they, electricity wise, Lebanon, most of the, I don't know what is the percentage, probably now about 80% of the power is actually provided by privately owned generators. and you have the politicians having stakes in these, and they always use, of course, their relatives, their friends who buy up these things, and then of course they have a share in them. So that's been the case ever since 1990. So the
So,
state is not really providing anything, especially in Beirut.
so what is the political structure set up to be in Lebanon? So we're in a democratic republic here in the United States. And then we hear about countries that are communist or socialist or fascist or whatever label you would like to apply to that. But what is the political structure in Lebanon?
I have no idea. Probably all of this,
Everything combined.
everything combined.
One thing that I wanted to say is that
Is there a structure in the first place? There's no structure. We lived without, I don't know, for 2 years, 3 years without a president or something.
yeah.
And the country was functioning. And because again, you have also the politicians, they own most of the big companies, the food suppliers, anything that you can think of is owned by somebody in the government, and they rotate. So the positions in the government, like, give me a name of a head of something, and then they take turns as to who's going to be in charge of telecommunication or power or whatever. So they take turns, and so there's we say in Lebanon, or most people are aware that they come and pretend to be arguing on screen, but we've seen pictures of them having fun and laughing their hearts out together in the background. So we know that's all a show as well. So there's an element to that.
Well, Rawad, it almost sounds like the political class is highly corrupt. It's about who you know, not what you know. And it is rotating corruption in different positions that appear to be enemies, and behind the scenes, they're best friends. That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, but it's in your face more than anywhere else, I would say. It's crazy. It's not like you have a revolving door, but it's like you leave your position and then you end up being in the company that was lobbying for stuff or whatever in the States. But in Lebanon, you don't need to do that. You can be in both places at the same time. And
Okay.
people know about it.
Yes. So I find that to be very interesting because I wonder if it's not very long before that's exactly how it is here. Because they're exactly how you described it. You do have people that are working in the government. I mean, as for example, if we wanted to look at the CDC or something like that, something in the medical field or the pharmaceutical field, and then they leave that public facing position, they go to work in private sector, and then the next thing you know, they're working at a huge pharmaceutical company or vice versa. And even though they're not doing two at the same time, I think that a lot of people are aware of that corruption, but it's a phrase that we hear people say very often these days is they're not even trying to hide it anymore. So I believe that we may be heading for a very similar situation where they just don't even bother to try to put on a facade of integrity or of not having conflict of interest in the name of their public facing job. Um, so I'm curious if we are going to be seeing that same thing, because while there's so much that has been going on in Lebanon and has been an active war and being bombed for a long time, there's a lot of overlaps in what you're describing. So I'm curious about if that's going to be kind of continuing or overlapping here very soon. And I think a word that came to mind when you were describing the situation was oligarchs. So these people that are very connected politically, socially, and that they are then able to get the monopoly on resources for people. So I wanted to clarify. So you're saying that do most people power their homes and their lives with a generator?
Yeah, privately owned, I mean by groups. So every neighborhood might have a generator that it's owned by one person or one entity, but this entity might be controlling multiple generators in around the area, not just, and some of them probably have evolved into becoming like conglomerates and covering multiple cities and so on across Lebanon. It's not necessarily like every household has a generator, although it might be the case in some, because the pricing is controlled again by these entities and nobody can argue with them, or you don't have any consumer protection bodies to do that. And if there were, they're managed by the same people who own these entities. So yeah, it's like they're pretty much a closed loop. You cannot really do much about it.
Okay, so that was the other question. And so essentially, if these group of people or this person who is controlling the power source for an entire neighborhood, if they decide that they want to charge more, they just arbitrarily raise the price. And if you can't pay, you just don't have power. Is that kind of how?
Kind of, yeah. Of course, there are always constraints, but yeah, it's very, very expensive. I don't know how much my parents are paying now. Maybe close to $300 before they raised the prices, before the conflict with Iran. It was you pay for the generators who supply about 80%, and then you have to pay the state provided power. So you have two bills basically. In some areas, you just have the generator, and it depends on how much, what is the capacity you're buying for, and then yeah, what is the pricing structure that they have in place. But yeah, they would come and they just shut it down. You cannot do much about it.
So, with that type of environment that people are living in and struggling under, do you think that that pushes people more to try to operate in, say, a gray market or a black market, or in some of the survivalist skills that we hear about? Like, okay, well, I'm just going to cook my food on a wood fireplace, or I'm going to trade rice with my neighbor instead of X, Y, and Z, or do you know what I mean? Like, this is something that we hear about in the United States, for example, in like the anarchist space, that people are encouraged to use cryptocurrency. People are, all about all this stuff. People are encouraged to try to operate with outside of the bounds of the usual, and to have relationships with their friends, family, neighbors, and to barter amongst each other and to utilize each other in order to kind of go around some of this, corruption or lack of power. Um, do you feel like that is taking place in Lebanon? I mean, I know it's been a long time since you've been there, but what is your experience?
I guess that was always the case. It's part of the culture to basically to go to your neighbor and get stuff and trade stuff. But cryptocurrency, I think, as far as I know, I wanted to send Bitcoin a few years, like at the start of COVID, where the hyperinflation started in Lebanon. But there's no way for you to cash these out. You have to know somebody locally and go and basically trade your Bitcoin for cash. So I wasn't, you're not able to send anything to anybody that they can benefit from. I don't know if things have changed. I'm sure people have come up with new ways to go around these things, but this is the situation. And the banks, by the way, are, when I ask my parents if I should send them money to their bank account, they say no, nobody uses banks any longer. So I don't know where they're keeping their money.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So that would indicate that everyone is just trying to operate in cash as much as they possibly can.
Yeah.
Now, no one uses banks anymore. That's interesting because I feel like that could also be something, a statement that we are saying here at some point. But what is that? So what does that look like? A society operating in mostly cash. There's limits to the use of cryptocurrency, and that would of course be because of the adaption. If you don't have someone who's willing to accept cryptocurrency, then you have to do exactly what you said, which is try to exchange that for cash. And there are limitations to that, particularly when you don't have electricity and maybe you don't have a widespread adoption of cryptocurrency in that society yet. Now, of course, I think that if that changes, that would be a huge freedom benefit for those people. No matter what issues you may have with cryptocurrency, I think a case can certainly be made here whenever people aren't using banks, whenever you're dealing with hyperinflation and you're trying to work with your community members as opposed to the ruling class or the political class.
Yeah, just to give you an idea about hyperinflation. So I had the banks, I believe that they knew about the crash coming. So for 2, 3 years prior to the crash, they were luring people to put their money either in Lebanese pounds or in US dollars, and they were given or they were promised very high interest rates. Sometimes, like when I deposited my money, after hard-earned money and savings from Dubai, after having worked in Dubai, I had no idea. This is pre-COVID time, so I was not awake, so to say, to these things. So I put all my savings in there, lured by these high interest rates. First thing happened was that the bank said, "Oh, we cannot no longer give you 6%. It's going to be only 4.5%." So they changed the interest rates. You couldn't do nothing about it. And then came the crash. And the crash pretty much was, maybe I own the bank money now. This is how bad it is. Like my money is still there, but it's not worth it because it's in Lebanese pounds. You have, if you go now on Google, the external exchange rate, if you're looking it up, they would say, I think 15,000 or 1,500. I haven't checked it a long time. But inside of Lebanon, I have no idea anymore, but it's maybe close to $1 is close to 100,000 Lebanese pounds. So at the time when I put my money was 1,500. And then 2 weeks after the crash, it got to 2,500. 25,000. So from 1,500 to 25,000. So my money basically, there's no need for me to go to the bank and claim my money because it's all gone.
It's worthless.
It's worthless.
So that was done through inflation, and there was a predatory way. Now, this is very interesting to me, Rawad, because again, I feel like this could be something, a warning to us. Now, I want to make a point. First of all, I know I'm neglecting the chat, and I'm so appreciative of everyone being here. But trying to run my own show and pay attention to Rawad, then I can't at this time. I'm hoping I'll get a little bit more settled, but I can't pay attention to all of the chat. But I am so happy and thankful that you're here. And I'm so glad that you're able to hear Rawad's experience and that he agreed to come on with me, because you have my mind is blown. Like we have talked a lot, Rawad, but we haven't not gone in depth about all of this stuff. So one of the points that I wanted to make is that Angry Tiger in the chat said that, yes, if whatever we're talking about as far as game plans go, it is purely speculative. We really have no way of knowing. And I 100% agree with that. What we do know is that regular people are suffering. But the other point that I wanted to reiterate to people is that this could be something that could be applicable to us here in the United States and maybe even Mexico. So there's some things that are happening technocracy wise in Mexico that I want to talk to you about. But just to your point that you were incentivized by the bank. So this is what made you think that they knew that a currency crash was happening, was because you were incentivized with a high interest rate to deposit your money into the bank. And what facilitated the crash? Was it COVID times? Was it bombing from Israel, civil war, like all of the above? What
All of the above.
Okay.
That's an
So,
easy one. Yeah.
okay. Now, do you think, or have you heard any rumblings whatsoever of them trying to so obviously that would be a way to just keep people poor, but you would also incentivize them after that to stay away from the banks and to try to be more resourceful. So what benefit do you think that the predator class got from that other than keeping people poor and keeping them from having a seat at the table politically?
Well, I guess the implementation of CBDCs, probably now stable coins. So I think they're just waiting on the right opportunity. Just we're all waiting. This is why I follow the US, because we know if it happens there probably is going to happen elsewhere. So I think that's what they're waiting on, just to see what kind of which way they need to go. But yeah, the situation allows for them to go in any direction they wish. I see in the
Yes.
comments there's somebody who's already, I don't know if they're Lebanese, but they seem to have some knowledge about Hezbollah and the Christian phalangist group. And I think they were asking me if I was a member of one of these militias. Sorry, I just took you to the chat again, but I found it quite interesting.
Yes. So I don't think that Rawad has been part of any militias. Now, in our conversation, I don't know, how much time do you have, Rawad?
I have no idea what time it is. But I don't know how long you're running for, but maybe another 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. That's totally fine. So I wanted to make sure two more things that I want to cover is we have heard about, if anyone missed the show, Rawad originally is from, or the beginning of the show, Rawad is from Lebanon originally, and he has moved around to a couple of different places in pursuit of opportunity and a better life. And now he and his family are in Mexico. And the idea, correct me if I'm wrong, was for you to have freedom to not only homeschool your children, which is something that you didn't have when you were living in Germany, and also just a better situation financially, a more affordable life, all of that. Is that correct so far?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So
Okay.
the main, just to add, the main reason I left Lebanon, because there's nothing that is working. So you wake up every morning and there's nothing to be appreciative of. And moving to Mexico was at the end of COVID. Actually, we didn't know that was the end of COVID, but we didn't want to spend another winter being locked down for the monkeypox or whatever that was happening at the time. So yeah, and you mentioned autonomy. I wanted to be with the people, or at least on the same time zone as the people I have connected with before I met you. Of course, that was before we met in autonomy. So that you're correct, and they just wanted to add a few reasons for moving to Mexico. Freedom, of course.
Of course, because that's something that we shared that value in the pursuit of being able to build the life that you want in spite of this crazy technocratic or fascistic or communist, whatever is happening here, for you to be able to live life on your own terms, which I think is really important. So what has your experience been like in Mexico? Because my question was, you decided to come there for all the reasons that we just mentioned, and time zone, building your business, which I'm going to make sure that we talk about that before we go. But did you have the full understanding of like, Mexico is also on the radar for the technocracy, it's going to be here sooner rather than later. Like, what was your thinking or thought process surrounding that issue?
Well, at the time, we didn't have many options. So we were looking at Eastern Europe, but then you have the language barrier. Since I spoke French and English, I thought that I could learn Spanish language much faster. Time zone. I wanted to do business with the US-based businesses, right? And then I was aware of corruption in Mexico. That's a big plus because you can buy your freedom in other places such as Germany, probably in the United States. That's not something that you could even mention to anybody, like especially the police, if they stop you to say, how about I give you $25 and you leave me alone, which you can do in Mexico. You just
Right.
need to be careful. But yeah, so just another trivia is like 75% of the population here doesn't pay taxes. So for them to roll out all of what they want to roll out would take some time. It's not impossible, but it would take quite some time. I'm in Querétaro. It's planned to be a smart city, but I'm not very worried about this. I live in a very Mexican area and we can leave at any time. It's not that they're gonna just dump a dome and you can't leave. But yeah, this is the situation in Mexico. They're definitely trying to implement eye scanning, and stuff like that. But I think so far it's been it's not something that you are forced to do. But this might be changing in the coming months.
So I got a question in the chat, which I think is an interesting question. So Angelo 1999 said, "Why is everyone coming to America from Mexico if it's good?" And I think that's a fair question because I think there's some nuance to be had there. And we did hear about a lot of people moving to Mexico for all of the reasons that you explained. But of course, we know that there's a lot of people that have left Mexico to come to the United States in order to try to earn more money, make a better life for ourselves. And we've also had the conversation about what is the work culture in Mexico versus maybe what we see with people from Mexico here, because it's very different. So in our conversations, as far as like the service that you're able to get or the quality of service and the timeliness and things like that, you may want to comment on that. But in the United States, the Mexican culture is known as very, very hardworking and like, just working a lot of hours, working very hard while they're on the job in order to get the job completed, and of being very entrepreneurial, restaurants, starting businesses of all kinds. And so the experience or there's quite the juxtaposition of your experience, at least in the part that you're at, as far as being able to hire someone to get them to do a job versus what we experience here. I know that was a lot. Say what you.
Yeah, I will start from the beginning. So you did mention. So the question was, why are many people returning to the U.S. after having moved to Mexico?
I think it's more about Mexican citizens wanting to come to
the citizens. Yeah. I don't know. My mind went that way because that's what I'm seeing as well. It's a big culture shock for Americans. We've met few families here. Querétaro, you have people from all over. Canadians, you see Germans, for sure, Americans, but most of them tend to return. But those who have been here for a long time, they're mostly woke people, like probably boomers, as you would call them. When it comes to Mexicans moving to the US, well, you have the welfare system, which is almost non-existent here. So
okay.
That's easy, and
yeah,
you've been the borders are open to them for them to come.
Yeah, I think That's a very good assessment. Okay, so the last thing that I want to touch on, if you're comfortable with speaking about it, is before we get to your business, and I know I've kept you longer, but just bear with me. We'll try to make it quick. Talk to us a little bit about, as much as you're comfortable with, growing up Catholic in maybe a like half Christian, half Muslim country, and then your journey to Orthodox Christianity, and kind of what made you decide that this is the route that I feel, as far as my faith goes, that this is what is, what is right for me and my family.
Yeah, before we get in there, because there was, I think there were other parts of your question. I just started from the beginning. I just
Okay, go ahead. So
probably
sorry.
lost it.
Well,
So the first part was why are so many Mexicans trying to get into the US, and then you talked about the quality of services and so on. So yeah, it's going to be very different if you move to Mexico. So somebody tells you one moment, that moment could be a month, could be a day, could be a few minutes. The first time I heard this, I thought they're gonna get back to me in a few minutes, just one moment. But I had to follow up multiple times in the coming days for it. So this is very, very common thing, especially if you're gonna be buying a plot of land and then you're gonna build. It's gonna be very difficult to build it on time. Like timeliness is not something that you can account for or you can expect. You cannot. I've seen people try to rent places without being on the ground here in Mexico to inspect the apartment, thinking that this is if they can do it in the US or wherever they come from, they can do it here. No, it could be a scam. The money could be taken away, or it could be infested with mold and God knows what, and you're gonna end up. I've seen a post from an American actually just the other day on a Facebook group where she was complaining about a landlord. She did inspect the apartment, but it was hidden very cleverly, and she returned to the US with her husband because of health problems. So you're gonna face all of this. So you have to be very vigilant, and you're gonna be more alive than anywhere else. That would be, I think, the bigger plus is that you're always on alert here. Whereas when I was in Germany, everything is working properly, and people complain about silly stuff like the tram is late 5 minutes. There's no tram here to worry about, but you have other things to worry about, and you have to worry about them all the time. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, but always a bad thing, but it gets tiring, but also you need that because convenience is always the way they get us.
That was so incredibly well said, Rawad. I think, especially in a lot of our circles, like those of us that align with anarchy or small L libertarianism or whatever that is, this is one of the themes that often comes up, is that, well, how would we know X, Y, and Z? How would we prevent X, Y, and Z? And you answered the question that we often get back from people that are well-versed in the ideology, which is you have to be buyer beware. The responsibility is on you. And that comes with pluses and minuses. You said it so perfectly, but I just wanted to point out the kind of the similarity in that conversation that is often brought up. It is buyer beware, and that you have to be an advocate for yourself. And there's a lot of personal responsibility and personal accountability when you're living in an environment like that.
Absolutely. You have to be on alert all the time, and you have to take responsibility for yourself and everybody else, as Manu once says, or in Eastern, it's a concept from Eastern Orthodoxy, and you have to be a monarch. So you have to be responsible not only for yourself, but for others as well. But it starts with you, because if you had a family like myself, if I fall for these things, everybody around me is infected.
Yeah. So, and you are blessed with a wife and 4 children, which is amazing, and I think so important in today's day and time. And you take your responsibility as the head of household and a father and a husband seriously. So you are trying to constantly be vigilant for things like that. And my understanding in our conversations is that you have done that, and you have lived in nice places and had a good experience with the homes and things like that that you have had in Mexico. Is that fair?
Yeah, like nothing drastic. And I guess we have to touch on the security or safety. I don't know how to look at it. Like, I have never been to the US or lived in the US, but I hear all the time that there are cities where you might get shot, whether directly or indirectly. Yeah, right. You could be involved in or be in the middle of a shooting, right, between two gangs or something. But here you've seen everything I guess a month or 2 months ago now with the cartel.
It was February, yeah, because it was, I think, at the end of February, the in Acapulco, that was happening in Puerto Vallarta, but it was done under the name of a head of a cartel was assassinated, and that the Mexican, I don't know, military and or police were involved in addition to United States Special Forces, which always screams CIA to me. And it just happened to coincide in the same town that an Acapulco was taking place, and all these journalists. But then we heard from, I messaged you right away and asked you if everything was fine. You said it was okay there. But we heard from other people like Hervoye from Geopolitics and Empire that they had some cars that had been, had to pull over, and cars that were burned down, and things like that. And I don't think he's in Puerto Vallarta, but anyway, yes, go ahead with that, Rawad. Sorry.
Yeah, I wouldn't call Mexico very dangerous. Of course, there are areas where it's like no-go zones, probably. But it's like, why would they come after you if you haven't done anything? Of course, they can rob you. These things do happen. But what happened 2 months ago, everybody thought like was thinking that, or it was made to appear as if the entire country was burning down and God knows what. But here in Querétaro, we didn't feel a thing. Like, it was very distant news, pretty much.
So, yeah, I think that that's a really important conversation, and maybe we can revisit this more in depth at another time, because we certainly covered a lot. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on before we talk about your business is your move to Orthodox Christianity, as far as your spiritual journey goes, from being raised Catholic and making the decision to begin practicing Orthodoxy.
Yeah, and in between, I just believed in God. So there, without really thinking about God, until we moved to Mexico. Without going into the details, it's just during COVID, like things like we're talking about the mark of the beast and all of these things, but it started there. Like, there's something in there that holds a lot of truth about what's coming. It's called revelation at the end of the day. And what is happening is the revelation. So this is why everything now seems to be in your face, because they always reveal the method, and they reveal, it's just like in the movies we used to watch in the 80s and 90s, where at some point the villain will tell you what the plan is. Yeah, and then I had, of course, some, I would say, experiences like dreams and stuff. Is just to further, of course, the skeptical would say, "Ah, you had the dream, and now you decided to become Eastern Orthodox." It's just I was following certain people and uh, getting knowledge about the content and about why, because the saying in the Eastern Orthodoxy is like it is the true church, which is true. It's just like I didn't understand what that is. Like in Lebanon, I was Catholic, but we always heard from Orthodox that they have the truth, or they have the key to the true religion. So I never really understood this until recently. And then I noticed, because I was into anarchism and all these things, and I thought, and Eastern Orthodoxy, which is very different than any really Christian denomination. I don't like this term, but it's very different. It's set up differently. There's a lot of details I cannot go into, but all of these elements of decentralization and what else? Decentralization and everything, how society should work, etc. It's already embedded there. You would say that probably they've taken, and some people would say that it's Christianity without Christ. Probably you've heard this being said. So things started connected, and of course you will have doubts, and you will always find the answers. It's a 2,000-year-old tradition from the apostles' times. So everything you can think of has been kind of answered. Of course, nowadays you have technology and things that were not existing before, but the underlying concepts, notions, or whatever, truths are still in there. So to me, before I haven't converted fully, because I haven't gone through. I didn't have a parish here, or I still do not. Luckily, there's a small. There's one priest here holding these services every now and then, and it's in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish well yet. But yeah, what I wanted to say is that I couldn't find faults that I could not get answers for, and it's the first time that I was encountered something like it. I will end it at that, because I think that's my journey, and there, of course, you will have skepticism, but unless you go in there and you explore and take your time, you will not get the answers.
Right.
I don't want to preach, but I would say, like Father Turbo Wall said, if you give yourself honestly 90 days to explore, you never know, maybe you will like it.
Yeah, and we have a lot of people like in the Knights of the Storm and with Angry Tiger Show and a lot of our friends that are on, everyone's on a different page religiously. And so I just want to be clear that I respect people's religious beliefs, and certainly am not trying to push anything on anybody or convince anybody of anything. But in my relationship with Rawad, the orthodoxy element has been important, and it's been part of our conversations, and it was part of our Bitcoin Mystery School experience as well. So I wanted to give him an opportunity to discuss that if someone happens to be interested, and just to say that it's part of his story of somebody who grew up in the Middle East, and he lived in Dubai and Turkey and Germany and Mexico. And it's a very rich history that you have, Rawad. So having said all of that, we have covered a lot. I want to tell you how grateful I am for this conversation. I have loved it and very much appreciated it. But I want you to tell people a little bit about what you do as an entrepreneur and how they can find you. And I did want to say that, at least in Rumble, I'm going to be adding the link for your business into the show notes. And of course, anybody can reach out to me, but tell people a little bit about your business and where they can find you if they wanted to reach out about your services.
Yeah, I'm a marketing consultant, but I also do implementation side with my small agency. I serve businesses in the US and I help them um, to basically acquire clients, and I build the systems basically that help them reach new clients, capture their interest, convert them. So, and these are systems that you do not have to reinvent, um, to rebuild every, how do you say, all the time. It's just you try to build it and you just improve on it, building an ecosystem basically to have customers coming in all the time, because I understand, and I serve mostly small businesses, local businesses who for the most part they rely on word of mouth referrals. So that explains why my slogan is grow beyond referrals.
Beautiful. And the website is lead, LEADNGIN.com. So that's lead engine, but it also kind of has a play of leads and gin. So if anybody has any question about that, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to be updating that in the show notes. And I did want to also say, if you happen to see the episode last week with Renee Devereaux, Rawad actually is who built Renee's beautiful website for her business and for her webinar that she is running that she started on April the 7th. So I actually did not know that until today when Rawad told me. So that's really lovely. But again, I'm going to update the show notes and have Rawad's website where you can reach out to him should you be interested in marketing, social media, marketing management, building the brand. Like, he does all kinds of things. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that with everybody.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny that I don't know. I would like to ask you about your screen, because this is not how the website looks on my screen and other people's screen. And the funny thing is that she had one eye covered. Very occult, right?
It's very occult of you, Rawad. Yes.
Yeah.
So
like-
I'm using the Brave browser. So maybe that's why. Like, maybe it looks a little bit different in that context. I'm not sure, but we'll have to
Yeah, it looks
figure that
different
out.
on different screens. But yeah, I would like to ask about how big is your screen, but offline, off the record.
Oh, yes. Okay, off the record, we'll talk about that. Okay, so great. We have covered a lot. Rawad, you have been absolutely wonderful and shared so much wonderful information. You've given us a huge insight into what it was like growing up for you. And I saw my friend Dustin Helm in the comment said that we have been so misled about what it's like in the Middle East. And I think that is so true. There's so much that we don't understand. It's presented to us as like, oh, it's mostly Muslims and Israel. And that's really not the case. There's a lot more nuance there. And you also have provided a lot of information on the background of Lebanon that it just doesn't get talked about. It's just not on our radar. And, shame on me for not knowing more, but I do have the goal of educating myself more on Lebanon and other countries, just geopolitically in general. So you have knocked it out of the park, and I'm so glad that you came on with me, and I really and truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. Lebanon is very green, by the way. It's one of the most open, actually, it's the most open society, especially Beirut, and country in the Arab world. We do not necessarily, we do have camels, but we do not have a desert, like at least big swaths of desert, and very good nightlife. If you ever visit.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. And before we go, I wanted to thank again everybody who joined me live. I hope that you're going to bear with me while I try to polish these rough edges of my presentation and my conversation and all of those types of things, as well as my goal is to eventually be able to interact with the chat more than I have been so far. But I want to thank the people in the chat, and Jason was helping me. I am not going to blame Jason if anybody gets missed. I'm going to blame myself, only me. But I want to thank him for helping me to get to be able to share on the Knights of the Storm stream, as well as helping me kind of in the background with keeping up with who's here. So shout out to Jason, shout out to Doc Rock. And Doc Rock has done my thumbnail work and intro and outro work for me, which I'm going to be working on getting that uploaded soon. So thank you to him. I also want to thank other people that showed up in the chat. It means so much to me and makes me so happy to see you here. Sweets, Dustin Helm, Spirit of the Age, Big Perm, my buddy from the Unknowns, and he also donated to the show. So thank you so much, Perm. I really appreciate it. Skunk Hollow, A Dingo Ate Me Baby, Nostradamus, Guard Goldsmith, SMU Haskey, Mo Studios, Will Tabox, Angelo 1999, Tony Ty, Handy, Ricky from Anything Is Possible, Wally Walrus, and Brad Souter. And if I did miss anyone, I truly apologize. As I said, bear with me. I'm just trying to find my flow here. And I told y'all before, I'm definitely a little scared doing this solo. So just bear with me. If you want to get in touch with me, you can always email me, ThinkChangeRepeat@gmail.com. And I'm happy to hear from you, suggestions, questions, clarifications, comments, anything like that. And I just want to say again how much I appreciate everyone being here. It means everything to me. And please, share this episode. If you think that there's someone who's interested in what's happening geopolitically, I felt like Rawad did such an amazing job of giving us more insight into what's happening in Lebanon and what it was like to grow up there, and even what it's like living in Mexico now. So if there's someone that you can think of who would enjoy, please feel free to share with them. Also, I have to say the obligatory, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. All right. With that, I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your evening and your week. And then I will see you on Saturday with Knights of the Storm. Bye-bye.